Good morning, Pre-AP kids. Today is Monday, and today's lecture is going to focus on Chapter 5. The first thing I want to talk about and bring up is the elephant in the room, the thing that some of you guys have emailed me about earlier on in the book, and it's a pretty common question with this book, especially leading up to and into Chapter 5, and that is whether or not Gene is gay. Well, first thing is, for our purposes and for the way we're studying the book, we're not going to put any kind of a focus on that. So if you have that opinion or you feel there's some kind of like a latent homosexual undertone or theme going on, you can certainly have that opinion. I can see absolutely where you might be coming from. But in my mind and the way we're going to analyze the book, it honestly doesn't matter. So yes, you could see those elements. If you choose to think that way, that is totally your opinion. I personally do not believe John Knowles intended for that. Again, I've tried to remind you from the beginning, and I'll remind you again, we are in the most intimate possible narrative style being in Gene's head, and we are getting his thoughts, and a lot of his thoughts are disturbing. Just the concepts of things like enmity, hatred, jealousy, resentment. You don't always get characters who express them as thoroughly as Gene does. So, Chapter 5, Gene puts on Finney's clothes when Finney doesn't come back because of his injury. And is it strange? Yeah, you could certainly look at it as strange, but something else I want you to think about is this. When you're a younger kid, chances are you put on your mom's clothes or your dad's clothes or older sister or brother or somebody. It isn't uncommon for a younger kid to put on, say, mom's high heels, or let's say one of dad's pairs of dress shoes. And then you could take it a step further where maybe you want to put on older brother's football jersey, or, some of you may have asked to see mom's wedding dress and then, oh, can I try it on? It's not an uncommon thing. Now, among friends, you also have some people who you trade clothes with people, you borrow friends' clothes. So to wear somebody else's clothes, more than anything, what Gene is trying to do is he's trying to feel the grandeur that it is to be Finney. And the whole idea of like imitation is the highest form of flattery. It kind of goes along those lines. But Gene wants to step into the persona and feel the power of what it feels like to be him. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you'd like to comment on that anymore or discuss it further, send me an email. It's no big deal. We'll talk about it. But for the entire class, that's where we're going to finish that element. So it says in the first page of the chapter that the effect of his injury on the masters seemed deeper than other disasters. And it said here that it was especially unfair that it should strike one of the 16-year-olds, one of the few young men who could be free and happy in the summer of 1942. And what I want to bring up about that is the idea of the reflective nature of the narration. That is obviously an older person looking back and realizing something he hadn't seen while he was there. And for those of you who've been picking up on this throughout, yes, we started off with older Gene, chapter 1. 15 years older going back, and then we flashed back to Gene in 10th grade going into the summer session to do his 11th grade year. And I don't want you to feel like you have to let go of that older Gene. He's there throughout this story. And there are a lot of things that a younger person wouldn't think about. And if you notice how many times Gene talked about his feelings, his emotions, those are the elements that are in real time. Those are the elements that Gene is living in the present. But when you get the insight that comes with age and experience, adult wisdom, that is most certainly the older Gene looking back. And it just, again, goes to show that this war is hovering over the boys, and they're really not completely aware of it. They don't acknowledge it. They're living in the present. They're living in what's in front of them right now. So the doctor tells Gene that sports are finished for Finney, and he should help Finney accept that. And Gene is really worried and nervous because, first of all, sports are Finney's life, and second of all, he feels really, really guilty about what happened in the tree. He's not sure what happened himself. It all just happened so fast. So when he goes to see Finney, one of the first things that Finney says is, he's like, "What are you looking so sick about?" And when he says that, you can tell that Finney's sense of humor is still somewhat intact. And then Gene comes right out and says, "What happened in that tree? I'm going to cut down that tree. Who cares who can jump out of it? What happened? What happened? How did you fall? How did you just fall like that?" And then Finney says, I just fell. Something jiggled and I fell, and I remember I turned and I looked at you and I tried to reach out to get a hold of you." And if it stops right there, the most harmful thing Finney said is, "I tried to get my balance by grabbing onto you." And then Gene says, violently flinching, "To drag me down too?" Finney's like, "No, to get a hold of you so I wouldn't fall off." And Gene talks about how he's fighting for air in this closed room. What's so significant about that is, again, it's the magnitude of guilt. The idea that he feels it is his fault. Now, there are three ways you can look at what happened in that tree. You could look at it as an absolute and total accident. You can look at it as, by some strange subconscious impulse, Gene made the limb shake and Finney lost his balance and fell. Or you could look at it as Gene purposely jounced the limb, hoping Finney would fall out of the tree. So I want you to think about those three different options and which one you might support. So Gene tries to apologize and tries to admit that he feels that it's his fault that Finney fell out of the tree. But then he says to himself toward the end, "I couldn't say anything to this sincere, drugged apology for having suspected the truth. He was never going to accuse me." And he never says anything. The chapter, or that part of the chapter, ends with Gene saying, "I didn't tell him." So the summer session ends. Everybody goes home for the remainder of the summer. And when Finney is at home, he's there healing, and Gene finds out that he's not going to be returning to Devon in the fall semester. Now, while that's happening, Gene decides to stop by Finney's house and visit him on his way back to school. Again, you notice that the trains are late, the trains are slow, the trains are crowded, all, again, influences of the war. So while Gene is at Finney's place, he is sitting in an early American chair. It has a rigid back and high armrests that force him into a righteous posture. So here what you could see, earlier in the book we have the weather paralleling the mood. Here the setting is paralleling the mood. Gene is forced almost like a church pew. Why are church pews almost at a right angle? Because you're supposed to be put into a formal position. You're put into a position where you're not meant to be comfortable. You're meant to be aware of why you're there. And this kind of chair, again, it's not meant for comfort. It's meant for its whatever kind of style they were trying to get at in that time period, but formality, that's the best word I can come up with. So Gene tries to, again, reconcile, and I would say reconcile more with himself than with Finney. He says to Finney, "I caused the accident, I caused you to fall from the tree." And if Finney said something like, "Well, of course you did. You lost your balance because you're a nervous wreck, and then that made me fall." There isn't malice in that. There's not any kind of intention in that. But anyway, in the end, Gene says, "I deliberately jounced the limb so you would fall." And then Finney's like, "Shut up, be quiet. I'm going to hit you if you don't sit down." And Gene's like, "Hit me? You can't even come near me. You can't even get up." And he realizes that he's injuring Finney again. And the idea that he's injuring him again is significant because what it shows is that Gene is trying to protect himself here. And in trying to protect himself or make himself feel better, he actually hurts Finney mentally. So he's been hurt physically, now he's hurt mentally. And then Gene walks it back and says, oh, I guess I'm tired. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, I gotta go. And that's pretty much the end of the chapter. What I want you to think about with this chapter, more than anything, is just the idea of whether Gene did this intentionally, whether he did this as sort of like a subconscious impulse that wasn't really meant to go the way it did, or whether it was a complete accident. And all I want from you is for you to tell me which of the three you think it is. And then what I'm going to ask as we read on in the book is for you to then develop ideas and thoughts. So all I need is a statement from you. You don't have to have any support yet because we're going to get into a lot of other stuff. So subconscious impulse, on purpose, or complete accident. All right, if you have work to make up, please get it in. Please label all the work you send me. I hope you guys are doing well. Hope your families are healthy, and I will be talking to you soon.